So I finished Wind and Truth, and I am devastated. I thought this would be a good send off for the series because the next book is going to be in 2030, which now that we are in 2026 feels like just 4 years. But when I read this book last year, that felt like a lifetime. And I wanted to finish this book knowing that the next entry in the series is going to be a new conflict. And that's not what happened at all. So before I dive into the details and the nitty gritty of the things that happened, this is your spoiler alert. And from this point onward, this video will contain spoilers for this book because I want to talk about how each of the characters we know ends their story in this book. So without further ado, let's begin. The first character I want to talk about is Adolin the Battleworn. So for the most of this book, Adolin is in Azir, where war happens. And I think this was such an amazing part of Adolin's story to be able to experience everything he experienced in such a short time. Because if you know this book, you know that all of this happens in the span of 10 days. And first of all, that's crazy that so many pages can happen in just 10 days. But yeah, so for Adolin, we know that he loses a leg, and we know that kind of loses Shallan as well, because she is trapped on a different dimension, but we'll talk about her later. But he also does a few interesting things in this book that I really thought were impossible. My impression of Adolin when I read the Stormlight Archive series before this book was that he was kind of a late bloomer, which meant that he would also become Night Radiant, but it would just happen later. A lot of clues, quote unquote, were that he was kind of a late bloomer. It goes with his relationships, it goes with almost everything. And the only quality he did always have, which was amazing, was his fighting skills. But for this book, he went into a whole different direction, and he goes into the fight with Abidi, not being able to wield Maya, and then he speaks to the armor, and the armor decides to leave Abidi and assemble itself on Adolin, which is behavior that we've seen before. Not specifically with armor, but we've seen in the cosmere people be able to talk to inanimate objects and animate them, essentially. And that got me thinking that we know that Adolin's mom is Iriali. And we know that the Iriali, in this book actually, we know that they move from planet to planet. So it is not so preposterous to think that Adolin's mom, her predecessors might have lived on the planet where Warbreaker happens. And if that happened, maybe she transferred that skill to Adolin. Now you're probably asking yourself, why would it work? Well, Adolin is known as someone who saved a lot of lives and have been very good to people. And I'm kind of thinking that maybe, just maybe, a lot of people told Adolin through the army, through wherever he went and was kind to people, I owe you my life. And if someone said that to Adolin, we might not see the magic of the physical magic of it like we see in Warbreaker, but perhaps Adolin has a lot of souls now. And if he has a lot of souls, it means that he can use them, even subconsciously, to do things to inanimate objects. I know that's a really weird theory, but it kind of dawned on me while reading this, and it also makes a lot of sense with the unoath that he founded during this book, where now you have Spren who can transform into shards and shard plates, and they are living instead of dead. And that means that oath do not affect them anymore, or the breaking of oath does not affect them anymore. This is probably something that's going to be very relevant in Book 6, when we live in a world where honor's power no longer exists for the general population. So yeah, I think Adolin finishes this book in a much more mature position. And also we are going to see in the next book what it's like to see Adolin after he loses his father. And that brings me to the next person I want to talk to, which is, of course, Dalinar. So first of all, I think we should all say rest in peace, Dalinar Cohen. I thought that one of the characters we love would die in this book. I really prayed it would not be Kaladin. I didn't expect it to be Dalinar, because Dalinar was like the glue that kind of put it all together, the Knights Radiant. And essentially, this was the biggest sacrifice he could do. It didn't do it to get the power. It did it to make Odium take the power. And that's when Odium became dangerous to the rest of the cosmere. Because now it's like harmony. There are two shards in one, essentially, god. So now honor and odium became retribution. And I think that speaks to Dalinar's ability to be in the cosmic events, because everything that happened in other places, for sure, Adolin made some stuff in Azir and had his moments, but they are related to him. Dalinar made moves that affect the entire planet of Roshar and a lot of lives. I don't think he ever considered how Honor's power is as much flawed as Odium's power, because all of them, in a sense, are broken shards of the one whole, which was Adonalsium. And I think we kind of see that in the visions that he has in this book, which are seeing Honor as a kid, and also the conversation he has with the Stormfather. So in a way, it's very tragic, but I think Dalinar had a good run, and everything kind of felt final in this book for Dalinar. But yeah, that move of rejecting Honor's power and breaking that oath so that Odium can take the power and become Retribution was an amazing piece of literature to read, and then like realize how the world is essentially breaking apart before your very eyes. So if we're already talking about Retribution, let's talk about Taravangian next. So we finish Rhythm of War with Taravangian fulling wit and changing his memories and actually becoming the new Odium. For a while, it's a secret. And I think the beginning of this book is shaping Taravangian into the actual new Odium. And I think that's really cool because we see him interact with other gods and kind of being told how to act, but then he realizes that he needs to decide, and he finally coalesces to the new Odium. Becoming Retribution is an error that only Taravangian could have made, because the former Odium would not have taken Honor's power for himself, he would have destroyed it. And then we would be in a very different position, because then the cosmere would be a lot darker, all of our heroes would lose their powers, and the greater cosmere would still reject Roshar and would turn a blind eye to what's happening over there. I think we kind of see that Taravangian is right for the job for becoming Retribution when he shows his weakness in this book, where he transports all the people of Kharbranth into kind of a dreamy world where they keep living like nothing happened. He let their home be destroyed, but he saved the people. But they don't know that they have been saved, and they don't know that the world they live in is not real. Very weird. Very kind of like I'm not willing to let go of all of the people I love and my former home, even though I am a god now. Also, the instant gratification that Odium can't resist, and Taravangian, being a new owner of the power, couldn't resist as its host, was very reminiscent of the Towers games that Adolin teaches Yanagon in Azir, where one player becomes the strongest, then the other players would team up to take him down. One of the highlights of Taravangian's story in this book is besting Jasnah. So let's talk about her next. So in this book, we see Jasnah have a battle of wits with Taravangian over Queen Fen. And ultimately, she lost Thelena because Queen Fen signed a contract with Taravangian, or Odium. And I think Odium didn't really care for Queen Fen's desires and needs. He was just there to best Jasnah. This was really like, whatever you want, I'll give it to you. Just let me best Jasnah. And Jasnah failed. She failed in besting a god, which is understandable, but it doesn't seem like it from her perspective. And I think her storyline in this book ends with the feeling that she is kind of spiraling. Let me know what you think about it. I don't really know what happened to her. She received a vague letter from Wit, which says they're no longer together. And she was kind of like maybe depressed, maybe, I don't know what happened to her. But I felt like her storyline in this book ends in a very strange way. And I'm very interested to see where it picks up in the next book. I just really don't want it to be 4 years from now, but it is what it is. Okay, so before we talk about the next set of characters, which are, of course, Shallan, Renarin, Kaladin, I do want to say that I have a blog where I document all of the books that I read, the TV shows, and all the movies. And it's kind of an archive of nerd culture. So if you want to read that, I also have a blog post of the video that you're watching right now in the description of this video. If you want to see more written content, because I usually go more in depth when I write, then you can find a link to subscribe to the blog in the description of this video. And now let's talk about Shallan. Shallan's storyline really hit me, I think, the hardest, because as a highly sensitive person, I also resonate with Shallan's story much more than any of the other characters. I think Shallan was such a badass in this book. She raised her radiant power in like the first 100 pages of this book, and she manages to rise more and more and defeat the Ghost Bloods and essentially finish this book pregnant. But she's pregnant on Shadismar. And now that there's no more stormlight, she can't go back. It's so tragic. Like, everything was going so well for her, and she just can't get back. But what I'm thinking about is that she still has pattern. And I think at the end of the day, stormlight is fuel. So maybe in the next book, Shallan will find other ways to fuel Pattern's power and perhaps allow her to return back to Roshar. Maybe that means she will find investiture from other sources. That's also another topic I think might be explored in other books, because we are reaching that point where there's probably going to be a big war among the shards of the cosmere. And when that happens, there will be intermingling of powers. At least that's my prediction. I don't know if it's true, but that's what it feels like. And if Shallan will find, for example, investiture from souls, as we discussed, Adolin might be able to, that could fuel Pattern's power also. Regardless, I'm rooting for my girl to find a way off Shadismar and back to Roshar. Next person I want to talk about is Renarin. So I think Renarin's story is so cool, so loving, so compassionate. I think it's a first for Brandon Sanderson. I don't know, actually, because I haven't read all of Sanderson's books, but I don't know how much LGBTQ plus content or stories he introduced in the past. I know that Skyward had some non-binary characters, but as a different species. I think this is the first time where a storyline is openly LGBTQ. I welcome it. I think it's very cool that he broadens his horizons like that. For me, I don't think that Renarin is a token character, but I think it is kind of weird that Renarin is LGBTQ+, and also possibly autistic. I mean, I'm glad that Renarin got more screen time, quote unquote, but yeah, it is heavily implied that Renarin is also autistic by the way that he experiences touch and by the way he mentions that he doesn't really know expressions that well, like it doesn't really know what people mean when they look a certain way. So yeah, that's just my observation. I didn't find anything wrong per se with Renarin's storyline. I just found it kind of weird that he was all the things. And now to talk about my best boy, Kaladin. Kaladin Stormblessed, Herald of Kings. That looks amazing. I feel like Kaladin's ascension to become a herald is possibly a bittersweet ending for his storyline in this book. The reason for this is he paid a price. By becoming a herald, he is immortal. And if we know something about Kaladin, is that he always survives. He has this, I think from the first or second book, he has this depressed period where he mentions like everything around, like everyone around me dies and I remain. And somehow I always survive or something like that. I don't remember the exact phrasing. And at the end of the story, it really did happen. He is now immortal. He is a herald. He will remain after everyone dies. And I think it is also possible that we will see Kaladin in other stories in the cosmere after this book. The reason is that heralds are not bound to Roshar. Heralds can appear in other planets, in other places in the cosmere, and they don't live on Roshar. They live in a different planet. We might see Kaladin in other short stories or as a guest appearance in other books that will come out until 2030 when the series continue. I think it is apparent from Shallan's mom, which was also a herald. She was summoned by Shallan in one of the dreams, and she wasn't on Roshar before. She was somewhere else, and she was kind of summoned into the dream. So there is still so much we don't know about heralds, and I feel like this is going to really change how Kaladin interacts in the cosmere. That's my hunch. That's my prediction. I don't know if anything already came out that either disproves or verifies this claim, but I'm happy to find out by reading more. And also, in a way, there's also the tragedy of the Stormfather killed alongside Dalinar from the Broken Oath, and still becoming the new Stormfather, essentially. Or Stormmother, or Storm Spren. I don't know how she wishes to call herself, but when he says the words to become a herald, that sentence that she says, these words are accepted, that tore my heart. There is a possibility of saying goodbye to Syl. I don't think we acknowledge it in the end of this book, but by becoming a herald, I mean, we do see that heralds have spren. It is something that can happen, but if Syl is now the new Stormfather, she is kind of stuck on Roshar, while Kaladin can go where he pleases, because he doesn't need to be on the planet. And the reason for this is the next part I want to talk about, which is the consequences to Retribution's ascension. So a few breadcrumbs that we get at the end of this book about Retribution and about what's happening to Roshar is that Retribution's ascension caused some kind of an effect around Roshar, around the planet, and time passes differently inside Roshar as opposed to the rest of the cosmere. And I think that means that when we get back to these characters in the next book, we are going to acknowledge that in the cosmere, a few years have passed, but these characters still live in the same timeline that we left them in this book. Shallan will still be pregnant. Adolin will still probably be in Azir. Renarin and Adolin would still be mourning their father. One thing that could happen is Shallan, stuck on Shadismar, could travel in Shadismar to a different planet and then maybe get help there to return to the physical realm. That's something that we know could happen. I think the Ghostbloods did it. Maybe that's how they travel to Scadrial. I don't know, but it could be. I think the other big breadcrumb that we get in this book is that inside Retribution, Honor's power is questioning, which feels like something might happen in the next book where Honor's power will break an oath. I mean, I feel like getting Honor's power was an oath from Taravangian, and maybe now the power kind of develop consciousness and be the one to disrupt the oath and break it. I think that would be an amazing change in the shards. And perhaps I'm just seeing things, I don't know, but it does feel like this is a clue that something will happen. Brandon Sanderson would not have written this if it didn't have meaning for the rest of the series. And I think now it's a good time to wrap this up with why I feel so devastated about this book. I said it in the beginning, and I will say it again. I wanted this book to be a good send-off for the series, because the next book is in 5 years. This was the end of an arc. And instead of being a good end to the arc, it is a tragic one. All of the characters finished their storylines with some kind of bad thing that happened to them. Aside from Renarin. Renarin has potentially a great place to be in right now. He is with the love of his life, and he will probably need to face his family, which is a different matter. But the rest of the characters are broken. Jasnah is broken. Shallan is stranded and pregnant. Adolin is battle-worn, lost a leg. Kaladin is ascended to become a herald, but is being separated from everything he knew on Roshar. Dalinar died, and to top it all off, the people of Roshar are now separated between believers of Retribution and people who still believe in honor, and all of the stormlight on Roshar is now gone. At the end of the day, it feels like a very low point to end the series on, and I know it makes me want to read the next one, but it also hurts so much to finish this book this way. And yeah, I really wanted these characters to have a good send-off, but I guess this is what needs to happen for the series to continue. I think that's all I had to say about the book. I am devastated, but I loved it, and I will reread it again. And yeah, let me know what you thought about Wind and Truth in the comments below. And I'll see you in the next one.